So let's talk about Leap. I got to play in a very, very short play test, but I did get to do some footage and get a feel of what the game is about before it goes into the beta, which is coming out in a couple of days. So I can tell you it's being developed in Unreal 4. It is a big, open, battle-esque PvP game. And if you're looking for a comparison, then I would say either look back to Unreal 3 when they had those big vehicle PvP games, or alternatively, it's got a very similar likeness to that of PlanetSide 2 and Battlefield. Now, the servers that I played in were 40 players. Whether or not it goes higher than that, I'm not sure. I don't believe they are going to be. And the maps were medium-sized. They certainly weren't huge like we've seen in 2042, but also they weren't so small that, you're looking at something like a COD map, for example. The mode that I got to play was predominantly domination. You had 4 main points, A, B, C, and D, and then you had 2 main respawn points that you could go to if you needed to. Now, there are no vehicles per se that you ride around and shoot guns on, but you do have what's known as a PV, which is a personalized vehicle. There are a fair few of these, but I'm going to go through all this stuff in another vehicle. But the one we got to go and play through for the test was a skateboard, kind of hoverboard thing, and you could basically fly around the map on it. It did have a max speed at the time, but I have no doubt that you can play around with it and get good and go a lot faster than I was going. You press space to go up and do backflips, you press control to go down and fall faster. You cannot fire while you're on the board, but you can get off the board and then fire while you're in mid-air. There is also a cooldown, so you can't just summon it and get off and then re-summon it. Now, I previously made the comparison that this game was like Tribes. I'm going to retract that. I would say that it's probably closer to PlanetSide. There certainly wasn't any kind of building of speed and traversing the map at a rate of knots. There also wasn't any capture the flag mechanics that were also kind of iconic in Tribes either. But yeah, definitely very similar to PlanetSide 2, look and feel of the armors, the weapons, and also has some undertones of the Unreal Engine as well, just from kind of like the aesthetics and the textures and even the music in the background. And this wasn't necessarily a bad thing because I really like the Unreal music, but I did think that it's worth noting that the two are very similar. So in terms of the core mechanics, you are one team versing another team, and the team is made up a whole multitude of classes. Each class has its own weapons and abilities, which I'll get onto in another video, but I'm just going to tell you now what they were as a general high level view. So you've got the Pathfinder, who's a bit like a soldier, who's got some supporting elements. He's got a shield that he can throw down and heal his allies in. You then have the Titan class, who's a big, heavy, slow individual with limited mobility but has massive weapons and massive damage. You've got the Wraith, who is your stereotypical sniper class, except you get to cloak, run really fast. You also have a power sword, which you can chop down enemies with in melee fashion. And you have a scout rifle, which has kind of the unique novelty that when you zoom in, you get to see all the enemies highlighted so that they are easier to hit. And last but not least, you have your Tech Ops, which is like an engineer or your more truer support class. He's got a secondary function that allows you to heal people with an energy beam. Also got a gun turret you can put down. And it's for individuals who really like to play, the more supporting role in your team. Nonetheless, I do like the fact that they have classes. I really missed it when it wasn't put into 2042. For these kind of games, I really think they're kind of important for being able to own and identify as a certain subtype of like whatever the playstyle you like to do is. It also allows you to own a role and also avoids min-maxing as well, with just certain weapons just being used all over the place all the time. I would also like to mention that there are other additional bonuses and ways that you can tweak your character. So there are suit modules you can put on that give you perks towards your class that you're playing. There's also augmentations that allow you to do different things. So for example, there's one that if you get a triple kill, then it will fully restore your health. And lastly, there are contractor bonuses which seem to be tied to getting XP for doing certain things or for a certain period of time. Now the last few things I want to talk about before I get into the actual gameplay itself. So there is a black market, so there's a shop that you can buy things on a daily basis. There is also a leaderboard if you like chasing the big stats and the top numbers in your region. And there is also a server browser, which is really, really key, I think, because I miss playing on servers. I miss being able to play with my friends on a regular basis, getting into clans and communities, and that being the word, community, doing these things on a regular basis, having some sort of social element rather than just some random VM in the cloud spinning up a new instance, you're joining, you're leaving, and you don't really have any social ties to that individual or group of individuals whatsoever. Now, let's talk about gameplay. Now, before we get going on this, I'm going to say as a prerequisite, I know it is early access, but these are just my general thoughts and feelings on everything overall so far. Now, the first thing that hit me when I got into the game, I run this on a 144Hz monitor. I have an NVIDIA 2800 series, and I'm also running this on an i9 900. And even though I wasn't running my FPS counter, going with my gut feel, I wasn't getting really anything over between 70 and 80 frames per second. And it felt a little bit stuttery, and it felt a little bit weird playing on, say, such a high refresh rate monitor with the low FPS. This was also with everything on low. I did change the DLSS settings to quality and then performance. On performance, the game just looks so washed out, and the textures are kind of so blurry in the background. It actually ended up hurting my eyes, and I struggled to focus on anything moving around. And with a game with so much moving on your screen at any given time, this was a bit of a no-no for me, so I just turned it off overall and just sat with kind of my low FPS. I think it's also worth mentioning that if you like to play with a high field of view, don't do it. Put it around 90 at the default. When I had it on a really high field of view, the weapons just looked like they had this really weird elongated effect to them, and just felt like they were far too thin and long all the time, almost like you were just playing with a sword with a trigger. But anyway, that is really nitpicking, and my own personal thoughts really. So, did I enjoy the gameplay? What was it like? So, it was fast, it was frantic, there was lots going on. There were lots of weapons, they have all incredibly long range, they don't really seem to have any recoil either. There is a little bit of bloom, I believe, but for the most part, if you are pointing the trigger at a long distance and firing, then most of the time you're going to kill your opponent with a little bit of tracking. The bullets are also their own separate entity, so they have to be led as well because they have a travel distance to the target. This meant that if you are unfamiliar with the system or a little bit rough around the edges with FPS games, then you're going to struggle hitting people over those long distances, regardless of the fact that you can see them and fire at them. Now, even though it was a domination mode, in typical fashion, it did end up just turning into a big global deathmatch game, with everyone just essentially jumping onto a rooftop and then just peeking and shooting and killing each other using the, numerous amounts of special abilities and ultimates at your disposal. During the game, you also get these things called drops. They have special weapons in them. They're gold weapons. They're incredibly strong, and it's really easy to rack up huge amounts of kills using them. And there are also special pods, which I thought were pretty cool, that give you back tickets if you're running low. So if you are losing, there are ways to pull back the game in your favour. There's also a squad system if you enjoy playing with your teams or you just want to play with your friends in a small tight group. And again, due to 2042, it was really refreshing to see these kind of features being returned. Now, if you like fast arena shooters or the deathmatch genre, or you're just a fan of Unreal Tournament or PlanetSide, I think you're going to really like a game like this. Where my concern lies, however, with this game is the fact that immediately, as soon as I got in, and I haven't played with the mouse for a little while, but I do love arena shooters, and I've been in the Instagib scene for a very, very long time. But this just was not beginner friendly whatsoever. It wasn't a game that I picked up and started shooting people and I felt good because I got a kill here and there. I was getting absolutely crushed. And that could just be because the server was filled with people who maybe have been playing it for a lot longer than I have. But there was so much air dancing and kind of like, doing trick shots and bits and pieces. It was just one of those things that immediately stood out, that if I was to give this to my mum, for example, and tell her to play a game of it, she's just not going to have any fun whatsoever. And it's one of those things, how do you make someone who is new to this game enjoy themselves and not just feel like they're getting stomped and never want to play again? Now, this might just come down to weapon changes and map changes and, various tweaks on the speed of things. But my gut is saying if it is as frantic and free-flying as it is now with so much speed, it is going to go the same way that every other deathmatch or game of this genre has gone before. Tribes was not a big, popular, booming game. Unreal Tournament 3 was not a big, popular booming game. It didn't invite people in its droves because they just got stomped by those who were good, because the skill ceiling was so high and the barrier to entry wasn't that low. Overall, I think with lots of love and tweaks and adjustments, I think this could be a really fun game. And as I said in previous videos, I think the time for this is really, really good. The market is ripe for it. 2042 has left a bit of a power vacuum for something like this to come along. There are also no big fast movement shooters like this left in the world either. And I know people in those audiences certainly need a home as well. But at the end of the day, my question to all the developers out there is, how are you going to get people coming in? How are you going to make it friendly to the new people? Anyway, lots and lots of videos to be coming out for this. I've got so much to go through. I hope you're all well. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? I want to have a great discussion around this. I will see you on the Discord servers. Do check out the Leap Discords, and a big thank you to Laura for providing the key for this. But until then, have a great week everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll be back with more news and reviews soon.